1 year had passed since the awakening. The galaxy looked nothing like it had before. Kyle Morgan stood in the new Galactic Council chamber. It wasn't on Centauri Prime anymore. Humans had built a new station at the exact center of the galaxy, a place that belonged to no single species. The station was impossible by old standards. It existed in multiple dimensions at once, accessible instantly from anywhere in the galaxy. Human minds had thought it into existence, and reality had obeyed. Representatives from every known species were there. Not just the powerful ones who used to rule, but everyone. The smallest colonies, the newest spacefaring races, even species that had been slaves for thousands of years. They all had a voice now. "The new charter is simple," Kyle announced. His words reached every mind in the galaxy simultaneously. Humans had learned to broadcast thoughts across impossible distances. No species shall rule another. No empire shall expand through force. No one stands alone. The vote was unanimous. How could it not be? Humanity had the power to enforce it, but more importantly, they had shown they would use that power fairly. In 1 year, they had ended 17 wars, cured 43 plague worlds, and prevented 5 species from going extinct. Captain Lisa Grant was no longer just a ship captain. She commanded the new peacekeeper fleet, ships from every species, working together. But the real peacekeepers weren't the ships. They were the awakened humans on board, beings who could stop conflicts with a thought. She stood on the bridge of the renamed ship Harmony, watching a dispute between 2 species over a colony world. 300 years of fighting over one planet. Lisa closed her eyes and reached out with her mind. She touched the consciousness of both species leaders, letting each feel what the other felt. Their fear, their hope, their love for their children. The war ended in 5 minutes, not through force but through understanding, Captain Tyler Ross said. He was her second in command now, his ability to see all electromagnetic spectrums making him the perfect sensor operator. "We're getting a distress call from the edge of the galaxy. Unknown attackers." Lisa nodded. "All human crew, link minds. Let's see what we're dealing with." 50 human minds became one, reaching across space to see what was happening. They found ships unlike anything in their database, beings from beyond their galaxy, coming to conquer. The invaders had technology that should have been unstoppable. Should have been. Ben Adams was there in seconds. Not in a ship, but flying through space himself, his awakened body treating vacuum like air. He approached the lead invader ship, a massive thing covered in weapons that could crack planets. The invaders fired everything they had at him. Energy beams that could vaporize moons, projectiles moving at near light speed, gravity weapons that could tear space itself. Ben raised one hand and it all stopped. The energy hung in space like a frozen waterfall. "Hello," he said, his voice somehow reaching them through vacuum. "I'm human. We protect this galaxy. Please leave." The invaders, a species that had conquered 12 galaxies, ran. They ran because they recognized what Ben was. They had seen species like humanity before, races that had evolved beyond physical limitations. They knew better than to fight gods. Back on Earth, things had changed completely. Cities floated in the air, held up by human will. The oceans were clean, the air pure, the forests regrown. Not through technology or centuries of work, but because awakened humans had decided it should be so. Dr. Amy Chen had become something more than a scientist. She was now the keeper of human knowledge, her mind containing the collective understanding of their species. She could answer any question, solve any problem, by accessing the shared consciousness of 20 billion awakened minds. She stood in what used to be her lab, now a place where humans came to learn about their powers. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, had just discovered he could see through time. He was crying, overwhelmed by seeing all possible futures at once. "It's okay," Amy told him gently, putting her hand on his shoulder. "I know it's scary, but you're not seeing what will happen. You're seeing what could happen. You get to help choose which future becomes real." The boy looked up at her with eyes that held the wisdom of ages. "I see a future where everyone is like us, where every species can do what we do," Amy smiled. Maybe someday. But not yet. They're not ready. We weren't ready, and we're from the same species. We need to guide them slowly. General Jack Murphy had retired from the military. There was no need for generals anymore. He lived in a small house in Colorado, the same one he had grown up in. But retirement for an awakened human was different. His mind was still part of the collective, still helping to guide humanity. He was sitting on his porch when his granddaughter visited. Jamie Peterson was 12 now, born just before the awakening. She had never known what it was like to be limited. "Grandpa," she asked, "why did our ancestors lock away their power? Why did they make themselves weak?" Jack had been waiting for this question. Every young human asked it eventually. He pulled Jamie close and pointed at the stars, visible even in daylight to their enhanced eyes. "Look out there," he said. "What? Do you see?" "Everything," Jamie answered. "I can see every star, every planet, every life form. And what could you do to them if you wanted?" Jamie was quiet for a moment. "Anything. I could move stars, destroy planets, remake entire species." "Exactly," Jack said. "And that's why they locked it away. 300 years ago, humans nearly destroyed Earth fighting each other with these powers. They were so frightened by what they had done that they chose to forget. They put limiters in our brains and became normal. But we're not normal now," Jamie said. "No, we're not. But we're also not the same as our ancestors. They locked away the power out of fear. We use it out of love. We protect instead of destroy. We heal instead of hurt. That's the difference." The Galactic Historical Archive was updated that day with a new entry. It was written by the Vorthak delegate, the same one that had mocked humanity just a year before. "When humanity unleashed its true power, we thought it was the end. We had awakened gods, and gods are terrible things. But humans are not gods, despite their power. They are something more rare and precious. They are gods who choose to remain, mortal in spirit. They could rule everything but choose to serve. They could destroy but choose to create. They could stand above us, but choose to stand with us." Captain Alice Ford read the entry from her ship at the galaxy's edge. She was part of the Deep Watch now, humans who monitored threats from outside the galaxy. Her consciousness could stretch across dimensions, seeing dangers before they arrived. "Another invasion fleet coming from Galaxy 7, she reported through the collective consciousness. "They'll be here in 6 months. The response came from billions of human minds at once. We'll be ready. We'll give them the same choice we give everyone. Join us in peace or leave. No destruction, no conquest, just choice." Kyle Morgan finished his speech to the Galactic Council. "1 year ago, you feared us. Now you know what we are. We are humanity. We scared ourselves so much with our power that we hid it for 3 centuries. But when you threatened our existence, we had no choice but to remember what we were." He paused, looking at every delegate, his enhanced vision seeing not just their forms, but their very souls. "We made the galaxy tremble with our awakening, but now we make it thrive with our protection. We are not your rulers. We are your guardians. We are not your gods. We are your friends. We are humanity, and we choose to use our power for peace." The Council erupted in celebration, not the forced celebration of the conquered, but genuine joy. The galaxy had gained protectors who could reshape reality, but chose to reshape hearts instead. Years later, when other galaxies told stories of the Milky Way, they would speak in whispers of the humans. The species that became gods but remained kind. The beings who could destroy everything but chose to protect everyone. The race that trembled at its own power, then used that power to make sure no one else had to tremble again. The galaxy had learned the ultimate truth. The strongest beings in the universe were not those who used their power freely, but those who had infinite power and chose restraint. Humanity had become the guardians of peace, not through force, but through choice, and in that choice, they had shown their true power. The Dominion Empire had ruled for 10,000 years. It fell in 6 days, not through war or destruction, but through something far more precise. Awakened humans appeared wherever they were needed, fixed what needed fixing, and vanished. They walked through walls, swam through space, and thought their way past every defense. Commander Ryan Torres led the mission to the Dominion capital. He took 12 humans with him, just 12, to face a planet defended by millions of soldiers and thousands of ships. They didn't need more. Ryan was 35, a Marine from Arizona who used to think he was tough. Now he understood that physical strength meant nothing compared to what humans had become. He stood on the bridge of a small transport ship, looking at the massive Dominion capital ship ahead. It was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could crack moons. "Ready?" he asked his team. They nodded. There was Sam Lee, an engineer from Seattle who could now interface with any computer by touching it. Next to him stood Maria Rodriguez, a doctor from New Mexico who had discovered she could see and manipulate life energy itself. The others were equally diverse, equally powerful. They didn't need to talk about the plan. Their minds were linked. They knew what to do. Ryan held out his hand, and space folded. One moment they were on their ship, the next they were standing on the bridge of the Dominion capital ship. They hadn't traveled through the space between. They had simply decided to be somewhere else, and reality had agreed. The Dominion crew screamed and reached for weapons. Maria raised her hand gently, and they all fell asleep. Not hurt, not killed, just sleeping peacefully. Sam walked to the main computer core. It was technology thousands of years more advanced than anything Earth had before the awakening. Now it looked simple to him. He placed his palm on the console and closed his eyes. His consciousness flowed into the machine, understanding its every circuit, every line of code. "I'm in," he said. "I have control of their entire fleet network." In 6 hours, they had shut down every military system in the Dominion Empire. No violence, no death, just a quiet ending to 10,000 years of rule. The Empire's subjects, species who had been enslaved for millennia, suddenly found their chains gone. The Dominion military couldn't function because their weapons wouldn't work, their ships wouldn't fly, their communications were silent. Ryan stood in the Emperor's throne room. The Emperor himself, a being who had lived for 5,000 years, sat on his throne in shock. He had ruled a third of the galaxy. Now he was just an old creature watching his empire dissolve. "Why?" the Emperor asked. "You could take it all. Rule everything." Ryan shook his head. "That's not who we choose to be. Your empire is over, but your people will be safe. Every species you conquered is now free. We'll make sure the transition is peaceful." Back on Earth, the changes continued. Cities were transforming as humans learned to reshape matter with their thoughts. Buildings that had stood for centuries were reformed into living structures that cleaned the air and generated their own power. Pollution disappeared as awakened humans simply decided it shouldn't exist, breaking it down into harmless elements. In New York, a 10-year-old boy named Alex Turner discovered he could heal any disease by touching someone. Within hours, every hospital in the city was empty. Cancer, heart disease, genetic disorders, all of them simply gone. The boy sat in Central Park, crying with joy as hundreds of people came to thank him. "I can feel their pain going away," he told his mother. "I can make them better." On Mars, Professor John Davis had made a discovery that changed everything. He could manipulate matter at the quantum level, but more than that, he could teach others to do it. Within days, Mars had a breathable atmosphere, not through technology or terraforming that would take centuries, but because thousands have awakened. Humans decided the air should be different, and it was. Emma Davis, his daughter, had become something even more extraordinary. Her consciousness could exist everywhere at once. She was the link that connected all humanity, the voice that helped them coordinate. She felt every human emotion, every thought they chose to share, every dream and fear. "Dad," she said, appearing as a projection in his lab, though her body was on Earth. "The other species are terrified. They think we're going to conquer them all." John looked at his daughter's image. She seemed older somehow, though only days had passed. The weight of 20 billion minds had aged her in ways that had nothing to do with time. "Then we need to show them they're wrong," he said. The demonstration came the next day. Every major species received the same message from humanity. It wasn't sent through normal communications. It appeared directly in their minds, spoken by Kyle Morgan but carried by the will of all humans. "We call for a new Galactic Council meeting, not to threaten, but to offer a gift." On Centauri Prime, delegates gathered again in the Great Hall. This time, the crystal walls were black with fear. Every species had seen what happened to the Dominion. They had seen humans reshape reality, walk through walls, survive in space, and disable the greatest fleet in the galaxy without firing a shot. Kyle Morgan entered the hall, but he wasn't alone. 100 humans came with him, each one glowing, with that inner light that marked the awakened. They didn't walk in formation like soldiers. They came as teachers, healers, builders. "We offer to share," Kyle said simply. "Not our power that's locked in our DNA, but everything else. Our science, our medicine, our protection." The Vorthak delegate, its crystalline form still cracked from fear, managed to speak. "Why would you share with those who tried to destroy you?" Lisa Grant stepped forward. She had left her ship to be here, to show them what humanity had chosen. "Because power without compassion is just tyranny. We could rule you all, but that would make us no better than the Dominion. Instead, we choose to lift you up, to prove their point." The humans began demonstrating. Maria Rodriguez healed a Kelvan delegate who had been dying from an incurable disease. Sam Lee upgraded their computer systems by thousands of years just by thinking about it. Others showed how human consciousness could solve problems that had plagued species for millennia. But the most powerful demonstration came from a child. Julie Morgan, Kyle's 10-year-old daughter, had been brought to the council. She was the youngest human there, but her power was already immense. She walked up to the Vorthak delegate, this ancient being that had lived for thousands of years. "You're scared," she said simply. "I can feel it. You're scared we'll hurt you like you wanted to hurt us." The Vorthak couldn't deny it. The fear was radiating from every facet of its crystal body. Julie held out her small hand. "I promise we won't. We're strong now, but being strong means we can choose to be kind." She touched the Vorthak's crystalline surface. Where her hand made contact, the cracks began to heal, not just the physical damage, but something deeper. The fear started to fade, replaced by something the Vorthak hadn't felt in millennia: hope. The galaxy watched as humanity, the species that could destroy them all, chose to heal instead. Ships appeared at every major world, not to conquer, but to help. Human doctors cured diseases that had plagued species for thousands of years. Human engineers fixed problems that had seemed impossible. Human teachers shared knowledge freely. General Jack Murphy stood in his bunker watching it all unfold. Amy Chen stood beside him, tears on her face. "We did it," she said. "We showed them what we really are." "No," Jack corrected gently. "We showed them what we choose to be. There's a difference. We have the power of gods, but we choose to remain human. That's what makes us truly powerful." The collective, that vast hive mind of 1 trillion beings, sent a message to humanity. It wasn't in words, but in pure thought. "We understand now. You are not conquerors. You are gardeners, helping the galaxy grow." Captain Alice Ford received the message for all humanity. She smiled and sent back a single thought. "We're just humans, but now we remember what that really means." Within weeks, the galaxy had reorganized itself, not through force, but through choice. Species that had been enemies for thousands of years made peace because human mediators could literally share their emotions, letting each side feel what the other felt. Wars ended not through threat, but through understanding. The battle for Earth lasted exactly 17 minutes. Admiral Thaxtor couldn't understand what was happening. His fleet of 500 ships, the pride of the Dominion Empire, was being taken apart by 40 human vessels. Not destroyed, but carefully disabled like a master craftsman taking apart a clock. Captain Lisa Grant stood on her bridge, but she wasn't really there anymore. Her consciousness was spread across space, touching every human ship, every human mind in the battle. She could see through thousands of eyes at once. Her enhanced brain processed it all perfectly. The USS Defiant moved through space in ways that physics shouldn't allow. Lisa wasn't piloting it anymore. She was thinking it through space. The ship would be in one place, then suddenly appear somewhere else without traveling the distance between. The Dominion's computers couldn't track something that didn't follow the rules of reality. "Fire all weapons!" Thaxtor screamed, but nothing happened. Every time a Dominion ship tried to fire, a human would appear inside it. Not transported, not beamed in. They would just walk through the walls like they weren't there. Private Jake Miller was one of them. He had been a nobody, a grunt soldier, from Iowa who joined the military because he couldn't afford college. Now he stood inside a Dominion battleship, surrounded by terrified aliens. He raised his hand, and every piece of metal in the ship responded to his will. "Sorry about this," he said, actually meaning it. With a thought, he reversed the magnetic fields in the ship's power core. The entire vessel shut down, leaving it floating dead in space. Then he stepped through the wall and into the next ship. Sergeant Katie Brown was doing the same thing 3 ships over. She had discovered she could phase shift through solid matter. She walked through the Dominion flagship like it was made of air. She found the main computer core and placed her hand on it. Her mind interfaced directly with the alien technology, rewriting its code with her thoughts. "Sleep now," she whispered to the ship. Every system shut down at once. On Earth, people watched the battle from their homes. They could feel it happening, through the collective consciousness. Every human was connected now, sharing the experience. Children who had been playing with toys an hour ago were now aware of a battle happening in space above them. In Ohio, Lisa Morgan, Kyle's wife, held their daughter close. Little Julie Morgan was scared, but also amazed. She could feel her father's presence across the light years. She could feel all of humanity, like a warm blanket of thought wrapped around her. "Mommy, why are we so strong now?" Julie asked. Lisa didn't know how to explain that they had always been this strong. They had, just forgotten. 300 years of forgetting, of pretending to be weak, of hiding from themselves. Back in space, the Dominion fleet was in chaos. Admiral Thaxtor watched his tactical display in horror. Ship after ship was going dark. No explosions, no destruction, just peaceful silence as humans disabled them with their minds. Then he saw something impossible, a single human floating in space without a suit. It was Ben Adams, a fighter pilot from California. He had discovered he didn't need a ship anymore. His awakened body could survive in vacuum, could move through space by will alone. Ben flew between the Dominion ships like he was swimming through water. He touched each one gently and its weapons turned into flowers. Literal flowers growing from metal, blooming in the vacuum of space. It was beautiful and terrifying. "What are you?" Thaxtor whispered for the last time. Ben heard him somehow across the vacuum, through the hull of the ship. He answered by appearing on the bridge, walking through the wall like it was a door. "We're humanity," Ben said simply. "We're the species that was so powerful, we scared ourselves into hiding. You woke us up." He touched the Admiral's shoulder, gently. Thaxtor felt knowledge flooding into his mind. The history of humanity, the wars that had nearly destroyed Earth, the decision to lock away their power. He saw what humans could do when they didn't hold back. He saw cities lifted into the air by thought, oceans parted by will, reality itself bending to human consciousness. "Please," Thaxtor begged, "don't destroy us." Ben smiled sadly. "We won't. That's why we hid in the first place. We don't want to be destroyers. But we won't be destroyed either." On Centauri Prime, the Galactic Council was in panic. They were watching the battle, seeing the impossible happen over and over. The Vorthak delegate was literally coming apart, its crystalline form unable to handle the stress of what it was witnessing. Kyle Morgan stood in the center of the chamber, calm in the chaos. He wasn't the scared ambassador anymore. He was connected to 20 billion awakened humans, their combined will flowing through him. Enough, he said quietly, but his voice carried across the galaxy. Every human heard him and agreed. The battle stopped instantly. Dominion ships floated helplessly in space, their crews unharmed but defeated. We propose new terms, Kyle continued. Humanity will not expand beyond our current borders. We will not conquer. We will not destroy. He paused, his glowing eyes looking at each delegate. But neither will anyone else. From this moment forward, we are the guardians of peace in this galaxy. The collective, the hive mind that controlled 1 trillion beings, tried to respond. They sent their greatest fleet, 1 million ships moving as one mind. They arrived at Earth's borders and found a single human ship waiting for them. Captain Alice. Ford stood on her bridge with just 50 crew members. But those 50 minds were linked, working in perfect harmony. Alice reached out with her thoughts and touched the collective's vast consciousness. Hello, she said directly into 1 trillion minds at once. We don't want to fight you. The collective attacked anyway. 1 million ships fired at once. The energy should have vaporized Alice's ship instantly. Instead, she raised her hand and the energy stopped. It hung in space like frozen lightning, beautiful and still. I said we don't want to fight, Alice repeated. Then she did something that made the entire galaxy go silent. She gently pushed the entire collective fleet back, not with weapons, not with force fields, but with pure will. 1 million ships slid backward through space, 3 entire solar systems like toys being pushed across a table. The message was clear. Humanity could reshape reality itself if they chose to. Dr. Amy Chen published her findings to every species simultaneously. The truth about humanity was out now. Their DNA contained sequences that no other species had. When activated, these sequences allowed humans to manipulate fundamental forces of the universe. Every human was now a being that could bend space and time with their thoughts. But the research showed something else. The same awakening that gave them power also enhanced their empathy and compassion. It was a biological safeguard. The more powerful a human became, the less they wanted to use that power for harm. General Jack Murphy stood in his bunker, watching the aftermath. Not a single life had been lost in the battle. The Dominion Empire's entire fleet was disabled but intact. Their crews were scared but unharmed. We could rule everything, someone said behind him. Jack turned to see a young soldier, eyes glowing with new power. Yes, Jack agreed. We could. But that's exactly why we won't. Our ancestors learned that lesson the hard way. Power without restraint leads to destruction. We're strong enough to destroy the galaxy. That means we're strong enough to protect it instead. The Dominion Empire surrendered within the hour, not because they were destroyed, but because they realized they couldn't fight beings who could rewrite reality. Admiral Thaxtor sent his final message to his emperor. The humans are not what we thought. They are gods who choose to act as guardians. We cannot defeat them. No one can. On every human colony, people were learning to control their new abilities. On Mars, Emma Davis was teaching others how to project their consciousness. She could show them the galaxy through her mind, let them feel the vast network of human thought that now connected them all. Her father, Professor John Davis, was showing his students how matter was just energy in a different form. He transformed a rock into water, then into light, then back into a rock. Reality is more flexible than we thought, he explained. We just needed to remember how to bend it. The galaxy watched in awe and terror as humanity revealed its true nature. In 17 minutes, they had defeated the most powerful military force in known space without killing anyone. They had shown power beyond comprehension, but also restraint beyond understanding. Kyle Morgan's final words to the council echoed across space. We hid because we were afraid of ourselves. Now we reveal ourselves to protect others from that. Same fear the galaxy trembled when we woke up. Now it will thrive under our protection. The signal hit every human at exactly the same moment. Kyle Morgan was drinking coffee in his quarters on Centauri Prime when he felt it. The cup fell from his hand and shattered on the floor, but he didn't notice. Every cell in his body was waking. Up, bro. Captain Lisa Grant was on the bridge of the Defiant when the awakening began. She grabbed her command chair as waves of change rolled through her. The tiny machines in her blood were working now, breaking down the barriers in her brain that had been there since birth. It felt like drowning and being born at the same time. Lieutenant Tyler Ross screamed. Not from pain, but from surprise. He could suddenly see the entire electromagnetic spectrum. The bridge wasn't just lit by normal lights anymore. He could see radio waves bouncing off the walls, infrared heat from every person, ultraviolet patterns in the air. His brain was processing it all perfectly. Captain, he gasped. I can see everything. I can see their ship's communications. I can read their data streams just by looking at them. Lisa stood up slowly. Her body felt different, lighter but stronger. She looked at her hands and could see the energy flowing through them. Not metaphorical energy, but actual electromagnetic fields that she could now control. On Mining Colony Beta 7, Bill Cooper was checking equipment when the change hit. He had been a foreman for 15 years, a regular guy from Texas who had come to space to make money for his family. Now he watched in amazement as his workers transformed around him. Sharon Park had always been small, 5 feet tall, maybe 90 pounds. She needed help with the heavy equipment every day, but now she was lifting a drilling machine that weighed 2 tons. She held it over her head with one hand, staring at it like she couldn't believe what she was doing. "Bill," she said, her voice shaking. "What's happening to us?" Bill didn't answer because he was too busy watching his own transformation. He could feel every piece of metal in the colony. Not just feel it, but control it. He raised his hand and every tool in the warehouse rose into the air, floating in perfect formation. Back on Earth, Dr. Amy Chen watched the data streams coming in from around human space. Every monitor in her bunker showed the same thing. 20 billion humans were awakening to their true nature. Heart rates, brain activity, cellular energy production, everything was increasing beyond what should be possible. "My God," she whispered. "It's really happening." General Jack Murphy stood beside her, watching his species transform. "What are they becoming?" he asked. "Not becoming," Amy corrected. "Remembering. This is what we always were. The limiters just made us forget." In space around Earth, the Dominion fleet was approaching. Admiral Thaxtor sat in his command ship, confident in his victory. Humans had less than an hour left on his deadline. His 500 ships would turn Earth into glass, then move on to the colonies. It would be over in a day. "Admiral," one of his officers said, "we're detecting strange readings from the human ships." Thaxtor waved a dismissive hand. "There, fear. Nothing more." But on the USS Defiant, fear was the last thing the crew was feeling. Lisa Grant stood at the center of her bridge, her mind expanding to touch every system on the ship. She didn't need to give verbal orders anymore. She could feel her crew's thoughts, and they could feel hers. 200 minds working as one, when needed, but still individual. "Captain," Danny White, the communications officer, said, "I can hear them. All of them. Every human in space. We're all connected now." It was true. The awakening hadn't just unlocked their individual abilities. It had created something unprecedented. A voluntary hive mind that humans could join or leave at will. When they needed to work together, they could think as one. When they wanted privacy, they could be alone. Kyle Morgan stood in his quarters, feeling the connection to his species. He could sense his wife and daughter on Earth. They were awake now, frightened, but safe. His daughter, only 10 years old, was discovering she could make light with her hands. His wife was calming her, even as she dealt with her own transformation. The door to his quarters chimed. A Galactic Council security officer stood outside, weapon drawn. "Ambassador Morgan, you will come with us. Your species has done something. We detected an energy pulse from Earth." Kyle looked at the officer, really looked at him. He could see the alien's nervous system firing. could read the electrical patterns of his thoughts. The officer was terrified. "I'll come," Kyle said calmly. "But you should put the weapon away. It won't work anymore." The officer pulled the trigger. Nothing happened. Kyle had disrupted the weapon's power cell just by thinking about it. The officer dropped the useless weapon and ran. On every human colony, the awakening continued. On Mars, Professor John Davis was teaching a physics class when it hit. Suddenly, he didn't need equations to understand the universe. He could feel the quantum fields around him, could manipulate matter at the subatomic level. He held out his hand, and the metal desk in front of him dissolved into a cloud of atoms, then reformed as a sculpture of his wife. His students watched, in awe and terror as their own abilities manifested. Emma Davis, his daughter, was in the next building. She discovered her gift was different. She could project her consciousness across space. She closed her eyes and suddenly she was everywhere. She could see through every human's eyes, feel what they felt, know what they knew. The amount of information was overwhelming, but her enhanced brain could process it all. The Dominion fleet was 20 minutes from Earth when things started going wrong. Systems began failing on their ships. Not all at once, but in patterns that made no sense. Navigation would fail on one ship, then weapons on another, then life support on a third. "Admiral," his science officer said, voice trembling. "The humans. They're doing something. Our sensors show their brain activity has increased by 3,000%. That's not possible." Thaxter stood from his command chair. "All ships, prepare to fire immediately. Destroy them now." But it was too late. Captain Lisa Grant had connected her mind with every human in Earth's defense fleet. Thousands of awakened humans working together, their consciousness merged into something that had never existed before. They reached out with their combined will and simply stopped the Dominion weapons from working. Not destroyed, not damaged, just stopped. Every weapon on 500 ships became inert metal and plastic. Back in the bunker, Amy Chen watched her screens with tears running down her face. "We're not human anymore," she said. "No," Jack Murphy replied, putting a hand on her shoulder. "We're finally human. For the first time in 300 years, we're what we were meant to be." The 12 hours were up. The awakening was complete. 20 billion humans had remembered what they were. But more importantly, they remembered why their ancestors had chosen to hide it. On Centauri Prime, Kyle Morgan walked back into the council chamber. The delegates backed away from him. They could feel the power radiating from him now. His eyes glowed with an inner light that had nothing to do with normal physics. "You wanted to destroy us," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the galaxy. The awakened humans were broadcasting his words through space itself. "You thought we were weak, but we were never weak. We were sleeping, and you just woke us up." The crystal walls of the chamber had turned black with terror. The Vorthak delegate's form was fracturing, unable to process what it was seeing. "What are you?" it asked. Kyle smiled sadly. "We're the species that scared itself so badly. We chose to forget what we were. We locked away our power because we were afraid of what we might do with it. But you forced our hand. You threatened our extinction." He paused, feeling the collective will of humanity flowing through him. "Now you'll see why we were so afraid of ourselves." The Great Hall on Centauri Prime was bigger than any building on Earth. Its walls were made of living crystal that changed color with the emotions of those inside. Right now, they glowed a soft blue of amusement. Kyle Morgan tried not to let that bother him as he walked to the center of the room. Kyle was 43 years old with gray starting to show in his brown hair. He had been Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council for only 2 years. Before that, he had been a history teacher in Ohio. Now he stood in front of beings from 100 different star systems, and most of them were laughing at him. The Vorthak delegate was the worst. Its body looked like it was made of glass, and every time it moved, light bent around it in strange ways. It had been alive for 3,000 years. To it, Kyle was like a child who had just learned to walk. The humans request expanded mining, rights in the Outer Rim territories. The translator device said as Kyle finished his speech. He had practiced it 100 times, but now the words felt small and weak in the massive hall. The Vorthak made a sound like wind chimes. "The infant species wishes to play with the adults," it said. Other delegates laughed. Some of them didn't even have mouths, but Kyle could feel their amusement pressing against his mind. Kyle kept his face calm. His wife Lisa had always said he had a good poker face. He missed her. She was back on Earth with their daughter, probably asleep right now. It was nighttime in Ohio. He wondered if he would ever see them again. Captain Lisa Grant watched the whole thing from her ship. The USS Defiant was small compared to the alien vessels around Zentari Prime. It had a crew of 200, and its weapons were at least 50 years behind everyone else's. But it was Lisa's ship, and she would defend it with her life. She was watching the council meeting on her main screen when her sensors started screaming. 3 ships had just appeared out of nowhere. They were Dominion battleships, each one 5 times bigger than the Defiant. "Captain, they're surrounding the ambassador's transport," Lieutenant Tyler Ross said. He was young, maybe 25, with red hair and freckles. He had joined the Navy to see the stars. Now he was seeing more than he had bargained for. Lisa's hands tightened on her command chair. The Dominion Empire was the real power in the galaxy. They controlled a third of all known space. Their technology was thousands of years ahead of Earth's, and they had just decided to make a statement. The main screen changed to show a face that wasn't quite human. The Dominion looked like someone had tried to draw a person, but got the proportions wrong. Their eyes were too big, their mouths too small, and their skin was the color of old paper. "Humans," the Dominion admiral said. His name was Thaxtor, and he commanded 500 warships. "Your expansion ends now. Surrender your colonies and return to your homeworld, or we will destroy you all." Back on Earth, it was 3 in the bite morning in Colorado. General Jack Murphy hadn't slept in 2 days. He stood in a bunker 500 feet underground, watching the same transmission that Lisa was seeing. The room around him was full of the smartest people on Earth, and they all looked terrified. Dr. Amy Chen was one of them. She was 38 years old, and she had spent her entire adult life studying human genetics. She knew secrets that most people couldn't imagine. She knew why humans were really so different from every other species in the galaxy. "They're going to kill us all," someone whispered. Jack turned to Amy. "How long?" he asked. Amy knew what he was asking. Her hands were shaking as she pulled up the files on her computer. Project Prometheus, the secret that had been kept for 300 years. The reason why humans seemed so weak compared to everyone else. To remove all the limiters? 12 hours, she said. "But Jack, we can't. You know what happened last time. You know why our ancestors put them in place." Jack looked at the screen. More Dominion ships were appearing every minute. They were heading for Earth, for Mars, for every human colony. 20 billion people were about to die. "Our ancestors never faced extinction," Jack said quietly. "They put the limiters in because they were afraid of themselves. They were afraid of what humanity could become." He turned to Amy. "But maybe it's time to let the galaxy see what we really are." Amy's fingers hesitated over her keyboard. 300 years ago, after the Third World War, humanity had discovered something terrifying about itself. They had evolved differently than every other species. Where others had developed technology, humans had developed something else. Something in their DNA that let them do impossible things. The war had shown them what that power could do. Cities had been erased by people using nothing but their minds. Reality itself had been bent and broken. The survivors had been so frightened that they had done something unique in all of history. They had chosen to lock away their own evolution, neural limiters, tiny machines in every human brain that kept their true abilities sleeping. For 300 years, every human child had been born with them. They grew up thinking they were normal, weak, just another species trying to survive in a hostile galaxy. "If we do this," Amy said, "there's no going back. Once the limiters are off, once people remember what they really are, we can't put them back." Jack watched as Kyle Morgan stood alone in the council chamber. surrounded by beings who saw him as less than nothing. He watched as Lisa Grant's small ship faced down 3 battleships. He watched as 20 billion humans went about their lives, not knowing they were about to die. "Send the signal," he said. Amy's hands moved across her keyboard. Hidden satellites throughout human space came to life. They had been waiting for this moment for 3 centuries. In 12 hours, they would send out a pulse that would reach every human alive. The nanobots in their blood would activate, the limiters would dissolve, and humanity would remember what it really was. Kyle Morgan felt something change in the council chamber. The crystal walls flickered from blue to yellow. Fear. The Vorthak delegate had stopped laughing. All the delegates were staring at their data screens. "What have you done?" the Vorthak asked. Kyle didn't know what they were seeing. He wouldn't know for 12 more hours, but he stood straighter and spoke with a confidence he didn't feel. "We've chosen to survive," he said. Captain Lisa Grant got the encrypted message 5 minutes later. Her eyes went wide as she read it. Project Prometheus was active. In 12 hours, everything would change. She looked at her crew, young men, and women who had joined up to explore the stars. They had no idea what they were about to become. The Dominion Admiral appeared on her screen again. "You have 11 hours and 55 minutes to surrender," he said. "Then we begin destroying your worlds." Lisa looked him in the eye through the screen. "You're making a mistake," she said. "You don't know what you're about to unleash." The Admiral laughed. "Humans, you think you're special. Every species thinks they're special when they first reach the stars. You will learn otherwise. 11 hours and 50 minutes. The countdown had begun. Around the galaxy, 20 billion humans continued their normal lives. They worked, they slept, they loved, they dreamed. They had no idea that in less than 12 hours they would remember what their ancestors had tried to forget. They would remember why humanity had once terrified itself so much that it chose to sleep rather than face what it could become.